The moment your heart stops beating, your body begins a transformation so profound that ancient scholars spent lifetimes trying to understand it, and what modern science has discovered will shake everything you thought you knew about death. Because what happens in those first 40 minutes isn't just biological shutdown. It's a cascade of events so precise, so orchestrated, that it challenges our understanding of where life ends and something else begins. If you're watching this right now, I need you to do something for me. Drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're watching from. This journey we're about to take transcends borders, cultures, and beliefs, and I want to know who's brave enough to explore this with me. Hit that subscribe button, because what we're uncovering today will change how you see existence itself. Let's start with minute 0, the exact moment your last breath leaves your body. Your heart, that tireless muscle that's been beating roughly 100,000 times every single day of your life, finally stops. Within 4 to 6 minutes, something irreversible begins in your brain. The cerebral cortex, the part of you that thinks, dreams, remembers, and makes you uniquely you, it starts to die. Brain cells are incredibly hungry for oxygen, consuming about 20% of your body's total oxygen supply, despite making up only 2% of your body weight. When that supply cuts off, those cells begin to suffocate, and they do it fast. But here's where it gets strange. Recent studies from the University of Michigan discovered something that scholars and theologians have whispered about for centuries in those final moments. Your brain doesn't just shut down quietly. It explodes with activity. Researchers observed a massive surge of coordinated brain activity in the seconds after the heart stops, a wave of neural firing that's actually more intense than normal waking consciousness. This burst of activity occurs in regions associated with consciousness, memory processing, and even dreaming. Some scientists now believe this could explain the vivid near-death experiences reported by people who've been revived, the tunnels of light, the life reviews, the feeling of peace or transcendence. Your dying brain might be giving you one final, overwhelming experience. Meanwhile, down at the cellular level, your body is making decisions without you. Within the first minute after your heart stops, your blood begins to pool in the lowest parts of your body due to gravity. This creates something forensic scientists call livor mortis, a purplish-red discoloration that starts appearing on your skin. If you died lying on your back, it pools in your back, buttocks, and the backs of your legs. But here's the eerie part. This discoloration can start appearing within just 20 to 30 minutes, becoming more pronounced as we approach that 40-minute mark. Ancient Egyptian embalmers knew about this phenomenon thousands of years ago and developed elaborate techniques to prevent it during mummification. At around the 10-minute mark, your muscles begin the process that creates one of death's most famous features, rigor mortis. But it doesn't happen instantly, like movies suggest. First, your muscles actually relax completely. Every bit of tension leaves your body. Your jaw might fall open, your eyelids might drift apart, and your sphincter muscles release, which is why the body often expels waste after death. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes this moment as the instant when the consciousness fully departs from the physical form, and interestingly, they prescribed specific rituals to be performed during this exact window. Around 15 to 20 minutes after death, something remarkable happens with your senses, or rather, the organs that housed them. Your eyes begin to cloud over as the corneas dry out and lose their transparency. That clear window you looked through your entire life starts to fog, turning milky white. Your skin begins to lose its elasticity, taking on a waxy appearance. The ancient Greeks believed that during this phase, the soul was making its judgment before the gods, and the body was essentially an empty vessel awaiting final verdict. Medieval scholars thought this was when angels and demons battled for possession of the departing soul. But let's talk about what's happening inside your body that most people never consider. Your digestive system, which has been hosting trillions of bacteria your entire life, suddenly loses its regulatory control. These bacteria, which have been peacefully helping you digest food, now realize there's no immune system keeping them in check. Within 20 to 30 minutes, they begin to spread beyond the intestines, starting to break down your body from the inside out. This is the beginning of putrefaction, though it won't become obvious externally for hours or days. Ancient Zoroastrian texts describe this process with surprising accuracy, calling it the corruption of the flesh and insisting that bodies be exposed to the elements within hours to prevent spiritual contamination. At the 25-minute mark, your body temperature starts dropping at a predictable rate, approximately 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit per hour in normal room temperature conditions. Forensic scientists use this cooling process, called rigor mortis, to estimate time of death. But here's something fascinating. The rate of cooling depends on environmental factors, body mass, and even what you are wearing. Ancient Chinese medicine practitioners believed that monitoring this cooling process could reveal information about how the person died and the state of their spiritual energy at the moment of death. They had elaborate charts correlating cooling patterns with different causes of death, and modern forensic science has actually validated some of their observations. Now we're approaching the 30 to 35-minute window, and this is where things get truly mysterious. Multiple religious and spiritual traditions mark this period as spiritually significant. In Islamic tradition, it's believed that the soul remains near the body for roughly 40 days, but the first 40 minutes are considered especially crucial. Jewish mystical texts describe a period called Hibut HaKeva, the pangs of the grave, beginning around 30 minutes after death, where the soul experiences confusion as it separates from the physical form. Hindu scriptures describe the prana, or life force, taking approximately 30 to 40 minutes to fully disentangle from the body's energy channels. Here's where modern science intersects with ancient wisdom in an unsettling way. Recent research on consciousness has revealed that the boundary between life and death isn't as clear-cut as we once thought. Dr. Sam Parnia, a critical care physician and director of resuscitation research, has documented cases of people who were clinically dead for 30 to 40 minutes and were successfully revived. These individuals reported continuous conscious experiences during the entire period. Their hearts weren't beating, and their brains showed no measurable activity. They could accurately describe events happening around their bodies, conversations between medical staff, and procedures being performed, details they had no physical way of knowing. This challenges everything we think we understand about consciousness requiring a functioning brain. By the 40-minute mark, if no resuscitation has occurred, certain changes become essentially irreversible with current medical technology. The brain, damage from oxygen deprivation, reaches a point where even if the heart could be restarted, the person you were, your memories, personality, and cognitive functions would be largely destroyed. This is why emergency responders have that critical window, why those first few minutes matter so much. But here's what haunts medical professionals. They've successfully revived people beyond the 40-minute mark who came back intact, defying every medical prediction. These rare cases suggest that there's still much we don't understand about the resilience of human consciousness and the true definition of death. Let's examine what's happening to your body's chemistry during this 40-minute window. Without circulation, your blood's pH begins to shift dramatically. Carbon dioxide that would normally be expelled through your lungs starts accumulating, making your blood increasingly acidic. This chemical change triggers a cascade of cellular breakdown. Cell membranes begin to rupture, spilling their contents. Enzymes that were safely contained within cellular compartments are now free to digest surrounding tissue. It's a controlled demolition that starts at the molecular level. Medieval alchemists, in their primitive understanding of chemistry, called this the dissolution phase, believing it was necessary for the soul's purification. Your sensory organs are undergoing their own transformations. The delicate hair cells in your inner ear that allowed you to hear begin to deteriorate. The taste buds on your tongue start to break down. The olfactory receptors in your nose cease functioning. Within 40 minutes, the intricate biological machinery that connected you to the physical world is beginning its irreversible shutdown. Ancient Egyptian texts describe the deceased needing to symbolically reclaim these senses in the afterlife, suggesting they understood on some level that death involved the loss of these connections. There's a particularly eerie phenomenon that occasionally occurs within this first 40-minute window post-mortem muscle spasms. As individual muscle fibers exhaust their final ATP stores, they can contract randomly and forcefully. This can cause the body to twitch, limbs to move, or even produce sounds as air is expelled from the lungs. Throughout history, these movements have been interpreted as signs that the soul was still present or that death hadn't truly occurred. This fear led to the invention of safety coffins in the Victorian era, complete with bells and breathing tubes, just in case someone was buried alive. Modern medical understanding has debunked these concerns, but the philosophical question remains: if the body can still move and react, when exactly does death occur? Let's talk about what's happening with your blood during this crucial period. As it stops circulating and begins to pool, the process of hemolysis begins. Your red blood cells start to break apart. The hemoglobin they contain, which spent your entire life carrying oxygen to every cell in your body, begins to degrade. This breakdown produces a greenish tint that will eventually become visible on your skin, usually starting in the lower abdomen. But within the first 40 minutes, this process is just beginning at the microscopic level. Ancient physicians who practiced bloodletting believed that the quality and behavior of blood after death could reveal the nature of a person's soul. While their methods were flawed, their observation that blood changes rapidly after death was accurate. Your immune system, which has been your invisible guardian your entire life, experiences a catastrophic shutdown during this window. White blood cells, without the circulation to carry them where they're needed, begin to die off rapidly. The antibodies floating in your bloodstream lose their effectiveness. All the microscopic defenses that kept you safe from the millions of bacteria, viruses, and fungi in your environment simply cease to function. Within 40 minutes, your body transforms from a defended fortress to an open territory. This is why ancient burial practices across cultures emphasized speed. They understood, even without modern microbiology, that something changed in the body that made rapid disposal or preservation necessary. Here's something that will make you reconsider everything. Your hair and nails don't actually continue growing after death, despite the persistent myth. What actually happens is that your skin dehydrates and retracts, making hair and nails appear longer. This optical illusion begins within the first hour after death and would be starting to become noticeable around the 40-minute mark. This phenomenon, terrified our ancestors, contributing to vampire legends and stories of the undead. When graves were exhumed and corpses appeared to have grown hair and nails, it seemed like evidence that some form of life continued after death. The truth is both more mundane and more profound. Even in death, your body continues to change and transform. Let's discuss the electromagnetic changes occurring in your body during this period. Your brain, which has been producing measurable electrical activity your entire life, sees this activity decline rapidly. EEG readings show brain waves flattening, usually within 10 to 20 minutes of cardiac arrest. Your heart's electrical system, which has been generating its rhythmic impulses automatically, falls silent. But here's what's fascinating. Some researchers have detected unusual electromagnetic signatures around recently deceased bodies, subtle field fluctuations that persist for 30 to 40 minutes after all measurable brain and heart activity has ceased. While mainstream science remains skeptical, these observations have fueled theories about bioenergetic fields and consciousness existing beyond measurable brain activity. Ancient Chinese concepts of qi and Indian concepts of prana both describe an energy that takes time to dissipate from the body after death, remarkably similar to these electromagnetic observations. Your endocrine system goes through a final cascade during this 40-minute window. Your adrenal glands, which have been producing stress hormones, experience a final surge of cortisol and adrenaline release as they die. Your pineal gland, that mysterious little organ that produces melatonin and has been called the seat of the soul by philosophers from Descartes to ancient Hindu mystics, ceases its secretions. Some researchers have theorized that the pineal gland might release DMT, a powerful psychedelic compound, at the moment of death, though this remains unproven in humans. If true, this could explain the vivid and often transcendent experiences reported by those who've been close to death. The timing would align perfectly with this 40-minute window we're exploring. Your body's water content begins to shift dramatically in these first 40 minutes. About 60% of your body is water, and without circulation, this water starts to redistribute according to gravity and osmotic pressure. Cells that can no longer maintain their membrane integrity begin to leak fluid. This creates a gradual dehydration of tissues, starting at the surface and working inward. Your eyes, being particularly water-rich and exposed, begin this drying process almost immediately, which is why they cloud over so quickly. Ancient Egyptian mummification practices specifically targeted this water content, understanding that desiccation was key to preservation. They would begin their process within hours of death, racing against this natural breakdown. Let's explore what different medical traditions and spiritual practices prescribe for this 40-minute window. Tibetan Buddhism has elaborate protocols for the moments after death, believing that consciousness goes through specific stages during the first hour. They practice Fawa, a meditation technique meant to guide consciousness out of the body through the crown of the head, ideally performed within 30 to 40 minutes of death. Traditional Islamic practice calls for the body to be buried within 24 hours, but special attention is given to the first hour with specific prayers and preparations. Jewish tradition has the concept of the Shevra Kadisha, the holy society that performs ritual washing and preparation, ideally beginning their work within this early window. These diverse traditions, developed independently across different cultures and millennia, all seem to recognize something special about this immediate post-death period. Modern resuscitation science has revealed something profound about this 40-minute threshold. We now know that death isn't a moment but a process, and different parts of that process occur at different rates. Your brain dies fastest, within minutes without oxygen. Your heart muscle can potentially be restarted after longer periods. Your kidneys and liver can remain viable for hours under the right conditions, which is why organ transplantation is possible. Some of your cells will continue living for days after you're declared dead. This creates a philosophical puzzle. If different parts of you die at different times, when exactly do you die? Is it when your brain stops, when your heart stops, when your last cell dies, or some other marker entirely? Ancient philosophers grappled with this same question, debating whether death was instantaneous or gradual, and we still don't have a definitive answer. There's a phenomenon called the Lazarus effect that occasionally occurs within 40 minutes of death, spontaneous return of circulation after failed resuscitation attempts. The heart, seemingly dead and unresponsive, suddenly starts beating again on its own. This is extremely rare, but documented cases exist. The exact mechanism isn't fully understood, but it might involve a delayed release of stored electrical energy in the heart muscle or a sudden shift in thoracic pressure. This phenomenon terrified medieval physicians and contributed to the fear of premature burial. It raises an unsettling question: how many people throughout history were declared dead but might have recovered if given more time? Your vocal cords and the muscles controlling them lose their tension during this period. As air escapes from your lungs, either from handling of the body or from the settling of tissues, it can sometimes produce sounds. These sounds have been described as groans, sighs, or even word-like utterances. Throughout history, these sounds have been interpreted as the voice of the deceased trying to communicate, leading to elaborate funeral rites designed to address the dead and ease their transition. Ancient Greek and Roman funeral customs included specific dialogues with the deceased, acknowledging these possible sounds and treating them as meaningful communication. Modern understanding explains the mechanism, but the eeriness of hearing sound from a dead body remains profound. Let's examine what happens to your gut microbiome during this crucial window. You host roughly 100 trillion bacteria in your intestines, outnumbering your own cells 10 to 1. These microbes have been your partners in survival, helping you digest food and synthesize vitamins. The moment you die, the relationship changes dramatically. Without your immune system suppressing them, these bacteria begin to proliferate wildly and spread throughout your body. Within 40 minutes, this microbial takeover is just beginning, but it will eventually be these bacteria, not external decomposers, that break down most of your soft tissue. Ancient embalmers fought this process with various antimicrobial substances, salts, oils, resins, even though they didn't understand bacteria. They knew something was happening inside the body that needed to be stopped. There's a remarkable consistency across cultures in the timeline of death rituals. Whether we look at ancient Egyptian, Tibetan, Jewish, Islamic, Hindu, or indigenous traditions, most prescribe specific actions within the first hour after death. These aren't arbitrary time frames, they're based on millennia of observation about how bodies change and when intervention is most meaningful. Modern medicine has essentially validated this intuition. The first 40 minutes to an hour after death is indeed a critical window for resuscitation, for organ donation, for preservation, and possibly for whatever spiritual or conscious processes might be occurring that we don't yet have tools to measure. Your body's temperature regulation system, the hypothalamus, stops functioning within minutes of death. This means your body stops generating heat and begins to equilibrate with the environment. In a warm room, this process is slower. In a cold environment, it accelerates. But universally, within the first 40 minutes, your body has begun its temperature descent. This cooling was one of the earliest and most reliable signs ancient physicians used to confirm death. The touch of death, that characteristic coolness, begins quickly but takes hours to complete. Medieval medical texts describe elaborate tests involving touch, mirrors held to the mouth, and feathers near the nose, all attempting to detect the subtlest signs of life before this cooling confirmed death's certainty. Let's talk about what happens to your bone marrow during this period. Your bones aren't solid, they're filled with marrow that produces blood cells throughout your life. This marrow is incredibly metabolically active, consuming oxygen rapidly. When circulation stops, these cells begin to die quickly, though they're somewhat protected by their location inside bone. Within 40 minutes, the production of new blood cells has completely stopped, but some of the existing stem cells in your marrow might remain viable for hours longer. This is why bone marrow transplantation must occur within specific time frames after harvest. Ancient peoples who practiced certain forms of ritual cannibalism specifically sought bone marrow from the recently dead, believing it contained a person's vitality or life force, an intuition that's eerily accurate given what we now know about stem cells. Your spleen, that often overlooked organ that serves as a blood reservoir and immune function center, undergoes rapid changes in this window. It stores about a cup of blood in most adults, and when your heart stops, this blood remains in the spleen, eventually breaking down there. The white blood cells stored in your spleen, which would normally be deployed to fight infection, begin to die off rapidly without circulation. Ancient Greek physicians, who understood surprisingly little about the spleen's actual function, nonetheless associated it with melancholy and death, believing it was somehow connected to the departure of the soul. They weren't entirely wrong. The spleen is indeed intimately connected with life-sustaining functions that cease at death. By this 40-minute mark, if you were to look at your body under a microscope, you'd see a landscape in transition. Some cells would still look relatively normal, their membranes intact, their internal structures preserved. Others would be clearly dying, membranes breaking down, organelles swelling and rupturing. Some would already be dead, just debris waiting to be broken down further. This mosaic of life, death, and transition exists throughout your body. It's a reminder that we aren't single entities but communities of billions of cells, each with its own life cycle, each dying at its own pace when the collective system fails. The electrical conduction system of your heart, normally so precise and coordinated, shows fascinating behavior in these final minutes. Individual heart cells can continue to fire electrical impulses even after the organized heartbeat has stopped. This creates chaotic, uncoordinated electrical activity that can be detected on an EKG as various abnormal rhythms. These rhythms gradually fade over minutes, with different parts of the heart going silent at different times. The last cells to stop firing are usually in the ventricles, the heart's main pumping chambers. Ancient Chinese medicine, which developed elaborate theories about the heart as the emperor of organs, described this process in metaphorical terms that actually capture the sequential nature of cardiac death with remarkable accuracy. If we could observe your DNA during this period, we'd see something unexpected. Certain genes actually become more active after death, particularly genes involved in stress response and cellular cleanup processes. This activity can continue for hours or even days in some tissues, reaching peak activity around the 24-hour mark after death. But even in our first 40 minutes, this process is beginning. Your cells are activating emergency protocols, trying to respond to the catastrophic loss of oxygen and circulation, attempting repairs that can no longer matter. It's a reminder that biological systems don't have an off switch. They run until their fuel is exhausted, following programming laid down over millions of years of evolution, unable to comprehend that the system they're trying to save is already beyond saving. We've journeyed through the first 40 minutes after the last breath, examining the cascade of changes that transform a living body into a dead one. We've seen how ancient wisdom and modern science converge on this period as uniquely significant. We've explored the physical, chemical, and cellular changes, and we've touched on the profound mysteries that remain. What does this teach us? Perhaps it's that death, rather than being a single moment, is a process, a transition zone where the boundaries between life and non-life blur. The scholars won't tell you this because it challenges comfortable certainties, because it raises more questions than it answers, because it requires us to sit with ambiguity and mystery. But now you know. Now you understand that those first 40 minutes are neither simple shutdown nor mystical departure, but something more complex, more strange, and more wonderful than either science or spirituality alone can fully capture. What you do with this knowledge is up to you.